Hello, everyone. It's been quite a while since we've had a session here, and I want this to be a session that works through the longer session on Reiki Healing Hope about when expectations don't meet reality, as well as what was requested here, a bit of a time and a topic on grief and going through the process and the healing as well. So welcome to Jet Lachey 9. I hope that you are doing well. I hope that in this season and time for you that you have security physically, you have emotional security, mental security, you have health, you have financial security, and you have happiness and protection and all of that. What really pulled me to do the session, the long session on YouTube about when reality or your expectations don't meet reality is I just feel, and I don't know if you all feel this way too, this energy of people feeling like they just can't do anything, and that when they do something, they're in the thick of the feeling of things, that it's not really actions that people are taking to create long-term change. It's actions that people are taking to hopefully initiate a change in this moment, which ideally is not a bad thing. I don't think anything is bad about any of that. But I think what's missing from the conversation, in my opinion, is the ability for the individual to carve out the things that they're building towards in life in an equitable way. I don't think it's separate. I don't think that social progress and understanding systemic infrastructure is separate from someone's individual dreams or goals. And I'm not saying that someone wants to go be a organizer or something like that. I'm saying that when we build our dreams and our goals, we take into consideration the equitability of those things. And I think that the state of the world today is because those who are empowered, those who have the most access, did not take others into account, did not think about the equitable nature, and most of it, the backbone of capitalism is exploitation, is those things. So I think a way to build towards a different future that isn't just how can we force these people in power to make better decisions, which I think is a part of the process, but seeing a future in which you are building and you are a part of building new and key infrastructure that is equitable. And it's no longer about them. And it's about us as individuals building towards. And again, you can do these things at the same time. And I think that oftentimes people feel that that is what they're doing or what they're hoping to do. But I also see a lot of people who are wanting to be connected to something. They don't feel necessarily a familiar type of thing. They don't feel different communities, but there might be different movements in which they feel a connectedness with. And there's many things that are going on in the world that we are definitely worth our time and worth working towards. But I also want people to take their time and truly understand things. Don't feel that you need to know everything that's going on in the world. Just learn what you know, things that are important to you in this moment, and share information with others. Don't feel that you have to be the expert on everything. This is kind of what I've seen in my life through different social movements. The social movements themselves are important and needed. But within the movement, sometimes there can be hierarchical things, political aspects. When I say political, I'm not just talking about politics. I'm talking about the political aspects of even, identity in different groups, hierarchies, different structures. So people might be very passionate about something, and someone who doesn't, maybe someone with narcissistic behavior will take advantage of that, will organize people in a way that demeans people, and they feel like they have the right to do it because it's for a good cause. I also am noticing quite a few people getting lost in activism. And again, organizing to have a better world is not bad. But some people don't realize that just because or whenever you're in any group, you still must think for yourself. You all can come together for a common goal, but also you must have discernment. So that means you might be in environments where you're being overworked, or in environments where you care about something, but there might be an indifference to something else that you're like, hey, that seems weird, or problematic behavior that could be happening. All of these things, or just, not having the patience to learn. As people are learning things that they didn't know before, it's going to take a lot of patience from, everyone involved. And it doesn't mean that in the face of indifference by those who have power, we all look at those who are trying to learn as, oh yeah, you must have been a part of the problem. And so people are afraid to learn. And then they get roped into more disillusion and more misinformation. So this process, though it can be seen similar in the healing process, takes a lot. It takes a lot of work, in which most people, in order to organize a large group, it typically doesn't work like that. Large groups typically work off generalizations. And when I say stereotypes, I mean like, hey, we all stand for this thing, and people may have consented like, yes. But when you meet and you talk to each individual person, they have different things that led them there. They may have slightly different ways that they feel like they should approach. And they are saying, together in solidarity, we come to try to make a change. And, there's nothing wrong with that. I just hope people take the additional step to build their goals and their dreams with an equitable aspect to it. I feel like that's the disconnect, in my opinion. I don't think it's the only thing that matters, but I feel like that's the disconnect. I think that people feel that being involved in activism is the only thing. And while I think that organizing is important, we are all stronger together. Being aware and learning more and more, especially from those who have been doing different work or doing the work for years, is important. I also think that people should think about their next steps, and that their life and their identity is not just here in this thing. It can be, don't get me wrong. Like there's many causes in which someone says like, this brings me purpose and passion, no matter if many people want to organize about it or not a lot of people want to organize about it, that this is something that I want to do regardless, that's fine. But I also think that we are lacking community and collectiveness in the moment. We are lacking spaces outside of actually, activism. Activism is doing a really good job of bringing people together. There are many aspects of our life that we still have to work towards. And I find that people in trying to address what's happening in the world and even in their own nation, that they're too afraid to think about the future. They seem as though a dystopian future has already arrived. So why even try? Like, yeah, let's rise up against, let them eat cake type people. But you still have to work towards your goals, your dreams, and your happiness. And I'm not saying that in an overwork kind of situation, like force yourself to do this and that when you need rest. No, I'm saying that there are things within you, passions and purpose, things of building and creating, whether it is creatives that are more of like the artsy kind of things, or being creative in a more technical way, or this or that. And so don't feel like you can't still build those things in this moment. Don't feel like it's selfish that you are taking time to still build those things. Add the aspects of what our world is now and what we don't like about it into the infrastructure of the things that you're doing. And I think that that is a part of how we move forward, that everyone feels that way. We celebrate different people and cultures and nations that help us on a human level to progress, to be better to the environment, to be better to each other, to be better for ourselves. The advancement in technology should not be in a way for people to just be able to hoard money. The advancement in technology should free up our time so that we enjoy life. We're not in this constant state where we have to war, where the world has to war, and that we are great stewards of the world. Like we care about ourselves and the environment. It shouldn't be these other things. But I think the process to getting there is to still learn. There's so many people who, there's two things that I feel like are coming up, which is the dismantling of the Department of Education, which actually doesn't even make sense because they're just trying to transfer the responsibilities to other places. So anyway, and also this indifference or this decision for younger and younger people not to want to pursue education. Now, the valid reason of the cost of education becoming this huge capitalistic machine and it's gone out of control, and millennials like myself saying like, yeah, we had to go to school and pay for all this, and then we came out to a very different workforce than what we were promised when we came into it. But outside of that, to be honest with you, everything that we do in society still requires us to have a higher level of learning, even critical thinking, especially when we look at things like the humanities and social sciences, but especially the humanities. So many people are being roped into political cults, things I've talked about before, both religiosity and the spiritual aspects of people being taken advantage of. And yes, you can have gone to college and still be roped into this. But often when you're in environments where you have to critically think, whether, a part of that is learning how to cram for something or learning how to retain a lot of information or working through procrastination, but critically think about things, you may not as easily fall for anything. Doesn't mean that someone won't still fall for anything, especially when you have traumas in your life or traumatic events and situations. It makes it much easier for someone who is a rational thinker or a critical thinker, or like, someone who's like, I have a bit of discernment in this, to kind of fall for something. I completely understand. But the environment of thinking for oneself, and not what I feel like people have been conned into think for yourself, and then they tell you what to think. Yeah, see that's different than what, no, for you to come to your conclusions, for you to do your independent research, for you, all that stuff. It's a part of the college process. And for the financial aspects, colleges are important, but there's also this ridiculous hierarchy aspect to it. Malcolm Gladwell talked about this when he was talking about how colleges are ranked. It's ranked based off of the presidents of the colleges ranking each other. It's not necessarily ranked on the outcome of the students or the individuals. So he was in this example talking about how there are HBCUs that have much better outcomes specifically for African American students when it comes to the job market that were ranked relatively low, because it was showing the elitism of who is allowed to rank. And then of course we do know that the more funding and the larger endowments that a place has, you hope that it leads to better outcomes, or how like sedity people or be like, oh, you came from this school, da 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 da. But I think what the general public is missing is that we have very strong community colleges in the United States. Why is that important? There are states that will pay you to go to community college. Some places where it's free, other places where you have to make under a certain income threshold. And if the income gap is widening more and more, you might qualify for that. And so the process of going to a community college, whether that is trade or going into something like those majors you would see at a university, is that going to a university is much easier to go via a community college than it is to go straight through a university. There's much more support, most likely, when you go straight to a university. But when you go through a community college, it's cheaper. You might live somewhere where they pay for you. And then when you go to a college, you're in a different situation in which you don't have to pay as much. You might qualify for this or you might qualify for that, just depends on the situation. But it might even lead you in this direction or that direction. So for all of these students who, for some reason, or younger people who are like, college, I don't want to go to college. Again, you don't have to, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to go to college because it's so expensive. That's not true. There's many ways in which someone can navigate their education and it not have to be expensive. Now, accessibility and understanding how to do that is going to be a deciding factor. And if you don't know, you don't know. People don't know that why, when they're cutting research funding, it's a problem, is because many PhDs, not all though, but many PhDs are funded. That means that the further that you progress in your education, you get to a certain point, not in all PhDs, but many ones, in which once you get to the PhD level, your research could be funded. So that means they pay for your school and they give you a stipend that's not a lot, but it is not as financially apocalyptic as I think people kind of describe it to be. Also, that there are many great universities doing great research. You do not have to always go to these prestigious universities. Like, there are situations in which, yes, completely, if you're going to law, they act weird if you don't go to a top program or this and that and da-da-da-da. But many people have figured out how to navigate different situations. And sometimes it's just the skill level, learning this skill or learning that skill and, doing research. And, so there's different parameters that you need. So I feel like all of this kind of doom and gloom and misinformation has really damaged people's idea of wanting to go to college. But it's kind of sad, especially for men, because I feel like men have been kind of like victim to this more. When we look at the demographics of college students, they're majority women. That's what's happening now. And it's been a steady incline. And so even though younger people don't want to go to college, those who are women. And so you think about in the future, I don't think it's a bad thing that women are outpacing men, but I think that, people should try their best to have discernment to realize that anyone in society can be a problem. They have a term, it's called a grifter, in which you might advocate for something that is terrible for your people or identities you belong to, for your own individual gain. So I think that people don't realize that it creates more issues in the future to just make people mad and like, oh, I can't do anything right now. And what's the point of trying? And this, like, if I'm being taken advantage of, why not just take advantage of people? And creating this whole, or the intention is to create this whole permanent, working class in which everyone is living for, paying into certain systems or certain, companies and, organizations, to be this perpetual thing, or not just the prison industrial complex, but the privatization of prisons. The privatization of prisons in which prisoners are being paid pennies or nothing at all in order to compete with global slave labor. The only way that we're able to do what we do in the world today, like when we think of fast fashion, we think of this, we think of that, is through slave labor. Whether that is in the US, the slave labor being those who are imprisoned, or you go somewhere else and those who are impoverished being taken care of, or being taken advantage of and having to be around toxic environments. So if that's the world we live in and that's how things are working, we should want to build towards a different world. And to do that, you have to build towards your dreams. You cannot just be one of the helpless and the hopeless. And a part of that is being connected, both in learning about the different things that are going on in the world and being active, as well as building. Do not let someone or some group dictate how you are going to create your life. We all should be consenting into the environments that we want to support. We all know that we are stronger together, but as individuals, we have to be individually responsible of not placing our entire identity into just this movement or that movement. You're an individual person. And as we want to see this world grow, we have to build the infrastructure. We cannot just let people not want to participate and just kind of allow life to just happen, just allow the chaos to be. We have to still move forward and create the world that is more equitable. That is what has been on my heart lately. And in the many conversations that I've had with others, I just kind of get anger from people, rightfully so. And I try not to be the disillusioned esoteric person who's like, if you just imagine things will get better, it will, No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that you have the ability to, in your own way, work towards what you want. And you should, whatever it is you're learning from this moment in time, intertwine it into how you're building whatever it is you're building. And at a certain moment, while chaos is happening, you have to find groundedness. You have to find calm. It's the only way to move past and to heal. You can't stay stuck here. So, yes. Also, there was a request here to work on grief. And grief, whether it is losing a loved one, not meeting the disappointment of things, or just the grief of trauma, there's so many things that are traumatizing, is a process. Rightfully so, we've heard that before, yes. But it is a process. There's nothing that I can say to make you feel better. But just the act each and every day of you getting up and trying to work through, trying to find a bit of happiness, even if it's just in that moment, trying to heal, letting it out through tears, is enough to heal just a little bit each day. The process that goes on and on and on. There are still times today that when I think of my grandmothers who were essentially my parents, they were the ones that paid for everything. They were the ones that raised us. They were the ones that created the environment, that is the home environment. And even though I have parents, they were going through whatever they were going through, and as what can happen, grandparents will step in. And the process of watching each one of them pass away was difficult. A very eerie conversation I remember having with my grandfather when I was a child. I was so close to him. And he would say, well, one day I'm going to die. How would you feel? Would you cry when I would die? And I'm like, oh, yes, I would cry. And then, obviously I understood that people eventually pass away. But when it happened, just a couple years later, over health complications, I remember being at the funeral not crying. It just felt so surreal. I watched the decline within his health, but it felt so surreal. And then a couple years later, like 6 years later, my other granddad, we had gotten very close in the last 4 years. And I was a senior in high school. And, you're a senior, you're busy, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. In that moment, I didn't know anyone who had ever gone to college, so I was trying to navigate that experience. And just everything took my full attention. And he kept on calling for me. He wanted me to come and visit. I was like, I will. And then when he died, my grandma said to me, when someone calls, you should come. Because you never know when it's their time. And he wasn't even sick you know. The old people had regular old people sickness, you know, metabolic syndrome like diabetes or something like that. But it wasn't in like my first granddad, like watching this kind of slow progression. And it changed me in that moment of like, whoa. So when my grandmother died, I was in that casket bawling. You could not get me off the casket. I remember I had a wig on and my track was out, and my sister just tried to keep on trying. I couldn't let her go, you know, because I remembered those experiences I had, and I didn't give myself the opportunity to be vulnerable with myself, to grieve in the way I needed to. I think I was in shock of those things. But now I said, this isn't right. This shouldn't have happened the way it did. But because it did happen, just let me be with her in this moment. I don't care what it looked like. I don't care how it is. And the way that people treated me while I was grieving, from the moment that I found out all the way to, you know, the hospital room, to the funeral, to even afterwards, let me know who they were. The people who came to me or offered to come to me or checked in on me, it let me know a lot about their character. They didn't have to do those things. And the people who didn't check on me or who wanted me to come to them to make it convenient for them, it told me everything about their character. The lessons that my grandmothers taught me, I was even learning a lesson on discernment of people, even in the process of one of their deaths. So even to this day, there are moments where I miss them, and I'll usually miss them individually. It was really hard for a couple of years of reaching milestones and thinking that they would have been here. Missing them. The whole reality that I knew no longer exists. The history that I have in my mind no longer exists. These people have already gone. What helps me though is when my next grandma passed away, she really suffered. It took a long time. She had an accident in which she became a quadriplegic. And so she kind of suffered being bedbound for like 10 years. And she told me another eerie situation in which right before her accident happened, she said, my greatest fear is to not be able to take care of myself, to be able to do for myself. She's a very active person. And she would have been active for the rest of her life. And then that exact thing happened. And when she eventually, passed away, I almost felt this sigh of relief that like, dag, now she does not have to suffer anymore. It's very different, of course, when people die suddenly or people die in some traumatic situation. In that situation, I felt, I'm so glad that she does not have to suffer anymore. And when I went to talk to my mom about it, she was a wreck because this was her adopted mom. She had lost her mom when she was young in Korea. And so she never had the environment or the ability to process those things as well too. And it shaped her. And I think my ability to watch how she seemed to be emotionally stunted made me want to be more active in my ability of working through things. And so my mother said to me, no, I wanted her to still live, like, if this is me, keep me alive at all costs. And I was like, I understand that the process of passing on is scary for all of us. It will happen to all of us eventually, hopefully decades and decades and decades into the future. But I was like, you really felt like that was the right thing to keep someone alive when they're suffering? She's like, yes. And then I thought to myself, I'm talking to someone who is just the little girl who never got to say goodbye to their mom, who was mad at their mom up to that point for reasons that make sense as an adult. but didn't get to say goodbye. So of course that shapes how she feels. So as I was able to move and progress through the feelings of that grief, crying, wishing, missing, enjoying, remembering, celebrating, I noticed how other people process theirs. And of course, no one's going to process anything in the same way. But when I miss them, I just think about them. I just try to celebrate them. And I also know in those moments where I miss them enough, they come to me in dreams. And as a healer, one thing that I try to do is I try not to do that often. Not because they're not here to help or assist us, because there's many traditions in which ancestor reverence and connection is important, but because I cannot be tethered to what is no longer reality. I cannot forego the future and the life that I have here for a life that has already gone. They have already lived their life. They have already gone on. And them on a soul level, however you feel that souls navigate, through our universe, they don't need to feel tethered to me. They taught me so many lessons that to this day, the lessons that I learned as a child, I'm still learning today. They left me with so much that even though they're gone, it's still fruitful. So, rightfully so with grief, we will still miss these people. And depending on the circumstances of their death, it was not right. And the wealth of beauty and knowledge that they left with us to continue to carry forward shapes us. I feel a great sense of responsibility to not just share this knowledge, but to live it. All of these things that used to exist within them exist within me now. And most likely only me. And how lucky am I to have had them, even if for a limited amount of time, even though I still miss them, even though I still grieve. I'm so lucky. So I hope as people are going through their grieving process and they take their time, I hope that if you do have space and you feel comfortable, you find ways to celebrate them. I learn about it specifically, and especially my grandmothers, a little bit more all the time. As I progress in life, I see them more as women and not just, a side character in my life, my grandmother. I see them as women, as their whole stories of the decisions they had to make. And I still learn today. How are you able to do this? How are you able to do that? If it was me, And I feel so lucky, even though I don't have them now. I feel so lucky to have had them in those moments. And there was in the process anger and just things that really made me mad. Even me being mad at them for different reasons. The circumstances of how they passed away just really upset me. And then through the process, what helps me to rest is that they are not suffering, that wherever their soul is, they have a freedom here that they were never able to have lived as, Black women who, my grandmothers were born in 1938 and 1944. They lived through segregation. They were born before women had the right to have a bank account. And these were women who made lives for themselves. They saw so many things. And they lived their lives I felt like they, went too soon. But they lived their lives. Even when I thought about my grandfather was born in 1934. And he died when I was 11. And we were so close. But I thought to myself, just this young black man from Chicago who came of age at a time where, he went to the military and it was the first time he saw the world. How interesting it must have been to him to go see the world. Something he had never known about. Something that would have not been possible. He then went to different places that he would have not had access to. There's many reasons of which one does not agree with of that circumstance, but how freeing it must have felt to a black man at that time to go somewhere else to see a different reality. He lived his life, There's many sweet things about him that I still think about to this day. I say that he is who taught me what love is. He would pick me up every day from kindergarten. And I realized later on in life that love is when I hit that hallway, I had to hit 2 hallways. When expectation meets the reality when it comes to loving someone. I'm so excited to see him. And every time I turned that corner, he was there. That's what love is. Not the confusion that many of us have as we come into our adulthood, that just because we think we love someone or we think they love us back, that's enough. If you get to the other side of that wall and they're not there, that's not love. And someone can love you and not respect you or not be consistent with you. And you don't, love is not just enough. But he taught me that. I only knew him for 11 years. And he taught me that. That's more than 20 years ago, So all these lessons that he taught, just by his nature, I still benefit from today. So I hope if you ever get a chance and you ever feel safe to celebrate them and talk about them and talk about the funny things and just remember them and work through the feelings that happen. And it's a progress or a process for the rest of your life. But just think about the beauty that came through them existing. Well, that's it for now. I hope that this has helped some. And I hope that you all are sweet to yourselves. If you would like an extended version of when expectations don't meet reality, it's on Reiki Healing Hope. It's a long session. So until next time. Be sweet to yourselves. Bye.